They always tell you never to bring work home with you. My father did his best to follow this rule. No briefcases, no suits, heck no pagers. They used to be a thing, trust me. He worked as a court-appointed psychologist, and it was his job to figure out if the accused was mentally stable enough to stand for his crimes, or if they needed some sort of mental health help. There was a brief time for about a month when I was a child that my father rarely came home. When he did, he looked different. On a normal day, he usually just passed the threshold of dorkiness, which turned him from the cool dad to the kind that makes you cringe. At this point in time, he'd usually come home, eat, drink, and leave without much of a word to anyone. It really worried my mother and me. For the longest time, I wondered about what happened to him, but I never asked. Once his episode was finished, he tried so hard to be the same man he used to be, even if he fell short every once in a while. There was just no sense upsetting him more than he already was. I guess the saying, "time reveals all truth," must hold some weight because fairly recently I stumbled upon a box in my mother's attic. Sadly, my father passed away, thus my sudden interest in all his old things. Inside the box were files upon files of every court case he'd ever worked on, at least the psychological paperwork, that is. I spent the better part of a day snooping around dusty old files that I shouldn't have been. I understood that every word spoken and written down was someone's life, and I was an intruder, scrounging around for a bit of entertainment. But in a way, it also let me feel closer to my father. I mean, he never talked about his work, and seeing the formal way he spoke to his patients was a side of him I'd never seen before. Only one case stuck with me, though. The handler. I want to say this right now. I'll write everything out that my father did, including notations. However, I'll do my best to translate them into a more readable ledger. The T will represent Thomas, my father, and the V will represent Victor, the handler. Anyways, here we go. Victor Sanford, alias Handler, age 32, height 6'3", weight 220 pounds. T. Hello, Victor. My name's Thomas Eidelman. I was designated to be your court-appointed psychological evaluator. V. Good morning. Victor was looking into my eyes with a sense of depth, a lidless gaze void of any humanity. T. In your own words, Victor, what happened? V. I came home early from hunting and there was an officer in my house talking to my dogs. He smiled at me with an intense vigor. His face would have radiated with a sense of beauty if it wasn't for the danger lurking behind his eyes. T. Your dogs. Are you aware of what they really were? V. Of course. Loyal, obedient pets. It took some time to train them, but they were a smart pack and they learned quickly. I could tell behind his avoidance he knew exactly what he had done. He was playing a game with me. T. Victor, it's best if we talk human to human, person to person here. I know you must think the world's against you right now, but it's my job to maintain impartiality. You can speak freely to me. I tried my best to sound genuine, but the photographs I saw in the newspapers, blurred or not, disturbed me on a deeper level than I thought possible. V. Listen, Doc, I appreciate you, I really do. It must be hard to talk to a man like me, but I promise you I'm completely sane. When that trial comes, I'll admit to everything I've done and more. My attorneys are pretending to be upset by my honesty, but I think they're secretly relieved they won't have to fight for me. He shifted in his chair as the chains around his wrists gripped uncomfortably around his flesh. T. I'm just here to make sure you're mentally aware enough to stand trial. Your cooperation would be very much appreciated. V. I just said I was sane. His smile faltered for just a fraction of a second, revealing the demonic features beneath. He caught himself before revealing too much. V. I'm sorry, Doc, I'm just tired of this type of questioning. I can promise I know everything I did was wrong, but I did it anyway. Can we just discuss something other than what I've already admitted to? He let loose a sigh as he slouched down against the back of his chair. I decided to humor him. T. Alright, well, let's start with what we know and work backwards. Why did you feel the need to do that to those girls? Victor's smile returned as he straightened himself back up. V. I did it because I stopped caring about things a long time ago. I braved a look into his eyes and saw a sliver of anticipation in them. He wanted to tell me everything. I just had to ask. T. When did you start to feel that way? V. There was no start since there was no middle or end. It just was. Though I can tell you the exact moment I went from feeling things to feeling completely empty. T. And when did that happen? Victor licked his lips and let his eyes roam upwards in remembrance. V. Strangest thing, really. Me and my parents were playing in the living room. I was about 6 years old. They were tickling me. I was trying to tickle them, and then something weird happened. Instantaneously, all feelings I had ceased. I felt my face go blank, and I saw the worried looks of my parents. Now, before you ask, no. There was no abuse from either of my parents. I had a good childhood. Victor rested one of his elbows on the arm of the chair and looked over to me, waiting on my response. I could tell this was the first time he'd spoken about this, and that he was waiting for some long-winded answer about exactly what was wrong with him. I didn't give him the satisfaction of even my slightest guess. T. Was there anything else in your life that altered your personality in another drastic way? His grin returned at my avoiding question. V. Only one other thing. T. And what is that, Victor? V. I no longer feel intimate with anyone. T. Explain that to me, Victor. V. Well, I learned an interesting fact. A fact most people must be oblivious to or just don't care about, but it's haunted me with every relationship I've ever had. Victor took a pause for dramatic effect, as though there should be a crowd of onlookers hanging on to his every word. V. We can't truly touch each other. T. What do you mean? V. I read about how particles work, about how they repel other particles and never come in direct contact with others. Victor placed his hands together, mimicking a prayer stance. You see, Doc, my hands look like they're together right now, but they aren't. If a particle wanted to, it could zip with ease right through the opening between my skin. That fact has bothered me to no end. Any meaningful relationship I had ended because of the lack of real physical intimacy. How can you feel intimate when you know you don't feel something as it truly is, just the resistance it gives off? I could hug someone, still not feel close to them. I just want to rip them apart in an attempt for some kind of real intimacy. He laughed as this revelation sent shivers down my spine. This one thing could be the reason that everything happened the way it did. T. Is that why you did those things to those girls? V. Maybe. When a dog looks at you, you're their world. At least if you have a good one. It might not be physical intimacy, but it is a kind of intimacy. I figure, why not try something like that with something a little bigger? But it turns out humans don't work like that. T. What do you mean? V. Well, given enough time, maybe someone who's living with another would develop some sort of symbiotic relationship with them. But it could be toxic if their independence is still there. They can still be bitches. T. And so what you did, you were trying to recreate that sort of pet owner relationship with real people? V. In short, yes. That and for fun. I get bored. Sadly, once you no longer feel attachment or intimacy, things just sort of fall apart. Life is pointless unless you give it a point. You've superseded your biological life's meaning of reproduction. T. Can you describe to me this process? V. Well, step one was to find a practice girl, kind of like an older dog at a pet store. They might not last long, but they can still teach you a lot about responsibility. T. Where'd you find this girl? V. Finding them's easy, it's the whole taking part that's hard. T. How so? V. I personally don't believe in drugs that'll knock the girl out, and I don't believe in alcohol to dull their senses. So I spend a night flirting with a few different people at a few different bars, and the first one to show interest in leaving with me who hasn't been texting or calling anyone to be my target. They'd leave with me, I'd drive out to my kennel in the country, and then do what I had to do to make them mine. T. And the torture, was there any rage or motivation behind that? V. I didn't get angry. It'd be better equated to a more sensual feeling. There was never what I'd call torture, since I believe torture doesn't have a point, it's just senseless violence. Every nick and cut I made was on purpose to fulfill the goal. T. And what goal would that be? V. To make obedient pets. There was another pause, this time from my end. T. Explain what you did to those girls. And why. V. Well, after catching them, I bring them into my cellar. At this point, they know things are wrong and they put up a fight. Victor fidgeted in his seat. The memories seemed to wash over him in a sea of lust and wanting. His eyes lit up with a near sexual desire. V. But all their clawing and scratching just made me feel that much more closer to them. After a brief moment, Victor noticed his less than admirable state and regained control of himself. V. Sorry, dog, I forgot where I was. Now back on topic. I'd end up bringing them to the cellar, grabbing them by their throats and slamming them onto a table before holding them down until they gave in to me. His eyes trailed over to mine and his head tilt to one side. I actually read that's a good way to make your dog realize who the alpha is, and it turns out it works on people too. I managed to talk him into this, into the meat of everything. But at this moment I wanted him to stop. I knew what was coming, and he seemed all too happy to tell me every detail. V. Once they stopped fighting, I strapped them down and placed a few tourniquets just above their elbows and knees. I needed to slow the blood flow so they didn't die from the transition. Next I grabbed some hot metal tongs and placed it far back on their tongues. The tongs themselves usually cut their muscle like butter once you applied the right amount of force. If it ended up being difficult, I'd have to grab some meat scissors and cut away the tougher parts. At this time, I'd usually wait for their bodies to heal in order to avoid shock and convulsions. Victor leaned forward with his back slouched. He was trying to force me to look into his eyes as I was taking notes. V. Next came the bloody part. The amputation of their arms and legs, leaving, of course, the arms above their elbows and the legs above their knees. This took the most time of the procedure. I took things slow to avoid as much complications as possible. I didn't want to kill anyone. A false sense of pity came over his voice, the sickening part being the fact that a normal person may hear his tone and believe it. V. At this point, I gave them time to rest and heal before teaching them how to walk. It was hard for them. Their necks had a hard time looking straight ahead on all fours, and their knobs didn't have as much balance as normal paws do. So I figured what the heck, made a few L-shaped bars and screwed them into their bones. Once again, gave them time to heal and eventually let them free to walk around the house. First they didn't want to, just huddled together whimpering in the corner, but they'd never get used to the pain of walking around like that, so I got them leashes. I felt my attention shift to his words, to transcribing what he was saying. I wanted to stop hearing about all this. V. I started by being patient with them. I knew it hurt. They'd yell or whimper when I pushed them too hard, so I gave them time. It was when they started barking at me that I became more of a disciplinarian with them. Barking at the windows, going to the bathroom in the house, begging for human food. The first few times would result in a stern no, but more than that might grant them a slap or a beating. Eventually I saw the light of independence in their eyes fade away into loyalty. They'd follow me around the house, their little paws clicking against the wooden floors behind me. Heck, they'd even sleep in bed with me, and well, everything else a good dog would do. It was even Belle who alerted me when the cops busted down my door. She was in the backyard on her chain and started barking out towards the woods for me. Luckily I heard her and rushed home. I'll admit I was upset it was a cop rather than a burglar since, you can't really fight the law. That's why I gave up when they spotted me. I paused for a moment, rereading what I'd wrote. I envisioned those 3 poor girls, all former college students now with a tainted future. For 6 years they lived with Victor. They spent over half their 20s with a man who physically and mentally abused them. It could take their entire lives to return to a normal state of mind, but even then I don't think it's likely. It's been weeks since they arrested Victor, and those girls have done nothing but lay in hospital beds whimpering and looking outside like a dog waiting for their owner. V. Well, Doc, anything else? What's your verdict? T. Did you physically touch those girls? V. Obviously, Victor replied with a sarcastic snort. T. I mean, did you seek intimacy with them? V. Oh, you're talking about sexual relations? What kind of man do you think I am, Doc? Sleeping with dogs? I would never. But it's a good thing we both know I'm sane enough to know they weren't actually dogs, huh? I nearly broke down as Victor laughed in response to my reaction. I ended the meeting early and let the guards take him. I'll put in a resignation for this case tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to look at my wife and child after this. I'll need some time to think.